This is the turn 7 update on the campaign, and what a bloody turn it was. We had leaders getting wounded and killed left, right and centre. So let's find out what happened. And the campaign that we're using is found in the Shatter of Spears, Thunder of Chariots rulebook that I've released, and you can find that on my Coffee channel. So at the end of last turn, the Romans in the Catavolani territory are kind of strung out there in hot pursuit of the Iceni, whilst their forces down in the Artribates are more or less consolidating. The plans and the orders given were in Artribates for their forces to converge on the old capital city, whilst in Catavolania one of the legions goes after the Iceni, one of them goes after the central enemy force, and then the Trinovantes troops are going to go up and attack. Whilst our Briton forces from the Artribates are withdrawing back into the Durotriges territory to consolidate, the Iceni are pulling back into their home territory, whilst the final two warbands, one under Caraticus himself, are going up to relieve the siege, and the other are going to try and continue their hit and run tactics. So our first battle of the turn is our Roman legion, who are pursuing the Iceni, and they were able to catch them. The Iceni sort of outmarched them to start with, but they were caught up, so they've decided they're going to form up on the hilltop. Luckily for them, they do have reinforcements en route from their capital, but we don't know when they're going to arrive at this stage, whilst the Romans just forming up in the centre, ready to take the sword to the enemy. May Mars be with his men. So this turn saw the general Roman advance across the open, the bolt thrower launching its bolts towards the chariots and inflicting a bit of damage, and the light infantry are mixing it up in the centre. On the Briton side, or the Iceni side, they switched their cavalry from one flank and they're heading over to the other side. This time we had the cheering and yelling of the heavy warbands on the hill as they looked down onto the field and saw the Romans advancing in echelon. The light infantry have come to grips and are currently locked in combat, and the chariots have raced forwards to try and take out this Roman cohort, or maniples. I think there'd be cohorts at this time, on their left flank. The bolt thrower again did well and managed to actually score a wound on the commander of the Britons, but he's still alive. So the Romans won the initiative this turn, and they swung this end unit round, preparing for a potential charge from the cavalry. In the centre, the Romans remain locked in combat, and during the fighting they've pushed back the enemy light infantry, whilst this cohort has gone forwards into the enemy light infantry, and at the far end the chariots and the heavies are still locked in combat. However, to the cheers of the Britons, they have got reinforcements who've come from the capital at the double pace, so they might be tired, but they're here, light infantry and heavy infantry. However, it should be noted that the Roman commander, who was trying to inspire his men to push forwards, did take a wound this turn. Not too catastrophic, but not what we wanted, or not what they wanted, I should say. It started to heat up a bit this turn. The reinforcing units, the heavies, have joined the battle line, whilst the lights have gone into the woodland to harass the Romans from the flank, whilst the Briton cavalry from the other side is making a beeline for those bolt throwers. So that doesn't look good for the Romans. The remainder of the Roman forces in the centre, they have managed to destroy the chariots, destroy one of the light infantry, which was the one which the cohort was going against, and the second has broken and is fleeing. The Romans themselves now are just trying to reform their line for the final push. In the destruction of the chariots, the Briton commander was wounded quite heavily. He's still alive, but suffered a pretty heavy blow. So this time the Romans have advanced. They're going up the hill. They have reached Pelum range, so they have inflicted a few casualties this turn, and next turn they will be going in with the sword. The Britons, they will most likely charge downhill next turn. Maybe they'll stand, who knows. As for the troops in the wood, they've just carried on their harassing fire. The cavalry were advancing towards the bolt throwers, but due to some very unlucky hits or good shooting from the bolt throwers, they actually broke, and maybe their commander got killed, who knows. But yeah, they broke, and so now they are fleeing the field. So it's still anyone's game. We're about to get into contact. So with a massive cry, the Britons charged down the hill, straight into combat with the Romans. On the Roman left, the numbers started to push them back, and then the light infantry burst from the woods and ploughed into their flank. So on the left, the two Roman forces have been pushed back this turn, whilst on the Roman right, they've pushed the Britons back up the hill with their light infantry, basically doing a mirror image of what happened to them. So yeah, it's kind of a precarious situation from both sides, with this sort of gap in the centre starting to form. We'll wait and see what happens next turn, but there's a lot of casualties this turn, but luckily no one has broken. So as this turn came to an end, the Romans had destroyed one of the war bands. The other are still locked in combat, but it's not looking good for them next turn. And then down in this second area, the Romans again were pushed back, so it is neck and neck, really is. The bolt thrower has been putting a few bolts into the flank, into the light infantry. Luckily so far they haven't gone amiss and taken out any of the Romans' own troops, but that is a risk. Don't know what's going to happen in the next turn, but let's see what goes on. So at the end of this turn, it went pretty badly for the Britons. On the hill, their commander was cut down in the melee, and his men have run for it. The Romans have redirected their legionaries to come down into the flank of the Britons, where they are cutting through them, and the light infantry was sent down to support because the Britons had overwhelmed one of their legions on the flank, or one of their cohorts, on the flank. But this turn, yes, the Britons have suffered heavily. They've lost their commander, taken a morale check, and now their forces are falling apart and are fleeing the field. So this battle goes to the Romans, although it should be noted they have suffered heavy casualties themselves. So now we reach our second battle. This is going to be the siege, or the lifting of the siege, of the Cativellani capital itself. So if you remember last turn, we had the Brigantes who had surrounded the capital. There was a sally forth last turn, which was repulsed by the Brigantes. And so at the start of the battle again, the Cativellani troops are going to sally forwards again to try and force back the Brigante besiegers. So at the end of our first turn, we've had the defenders. They've moved forwards out of their sort of defensive position, and they're starting to launch javelins and arrows and whatnot down the hill onto the Brigantes down below. So they are sallying forth to come out, but we'll see what happens. So far, just a few light casualties this turn. So this turn saw a big push for the Brigantes, forcing their way up the hill. Light infantry have gone in, followed up by heavy infantry. However, the clatter of battle, the risk that the capital was under siege, and reinforcing troops from neighbouring villages, I assume, have rushed to try and save the capital. Heavy infantry and a cavalry detachment. We randomly rolled to see which direction they would come in from, and it was this side. This turn sees fierce fighting along the whole line. The defending cavalry have come forwards and they've charged the flank of the Brigantes. In the centre, in the melee, the attackers, the Brigantes, have pushed up the hill, and on the left flank they've been forced back down. We're just going to find out what happens in this cavalry situation. So unfortunately for the Brigantes, the cavalry were able to overwhelm the infantry, which also gave a boost to the attacking infantry themselves coming down the hill. So the Brigante light infantry, heavy infantry were overrun and destroyed, and their commander, leading from the front, was cut to pieces. So now we need to test for morale for the rest of their force. Luckily not the entire force, but one of the heavies from the centre and the lights from the left wing have broken. So the Brigantes are in a very precarious position. Will their Trinovantes allies arrive in time to assist? Reinforcements have arrived, just in the nick of time. Unfortunately not. This is Caraticus and his relief column that were dispatched up. They arrived, must have been force marching, and they've now come on, cutting off the Brigantes' line of retreat. In the centre, the cavalry have swept across, one of the units going after the fleeing infantry, the other ploughing into the side of the light infantry who had just pulled back. The remaining forces along the lines are pushing up. They do know the Trinovantes are out there, but they don't know what turn they're going to arrive. So with the Trinovantes on the field, they can see their hated foe who tried to take over their capital a few years earlier. And whilst they do appear to be outnumbered, it's not just an appearance, they are outnumbered, their war lust, their bloodlust is too great, and they are going forwards to see what they can do. So this turn, despite being outnumbered, the Trinovantes had great success. Their cavalry, with their charge, pushed back the two enemy cavalry detachments. In the centre, the Catavolani were forced back by all three, the light infantry and the two heavies. On this side, the Catavolani heavy infantry did overrun the light infantry of the Trinovantes, but then they were stopped on their heavies. So actually, pretty good turn for the Trinovantes. They inflicted some good casualties. Other than that, the Catavolani have just started to try and pull troops in from the other side. Another good turn for the Trinovantes. Their numbers are just telling. They're just churning through the enemy. The cavalry again inflicted more damage, so forced back the Catavolani cavalry. The infantry themselves pushed forwards. The light infantry overran the enemy light infantry, and the heavies just got pushed back. And then over here, the sort of 2 against 1 attack here. Again, the heavy infantry of the Catavolani have held. And on this side, the heavy infantry have gone forwards and overran the light infantry. So, good turn again for the Trinovantes. However, there are reinforcements about to arrive. So this turn saw the Trinovantes realising that time and numbers were against them, have started to withdraw back in the centre. They gained the initiative, which is quite lucky for them. Got some good numbers of orders, so their main force in the centre withdrawing. The cavalry, unfortunately, the weight of numbers started to tell this turn. They were forced back. They weren't destroyed, didn't break, but just forced back. And then down at this end, they were able to extricate themselves from the combat and are pulling back, but the numbers are barreling down on them. And after a quick little discussion, the Trinovantes player decided that he was going to withdraw from the battle as best he can. So we will roll on the withdrawing from combat table to see what happens, and then apply any casualties that may or may not be suffered by them. But this is a pretty good victory overall for the Catavolani. Brigantes knocked out a bit early on, and the Trinovantes now inflicted a lot of damage, but they've also taken damage themselves. So a good victory for the Catavolani, however not completely decisive. And now I'll just quickly go over the third combat of the game. I didn't actually fight a pitched battle, but where the Romans were pursuing the Britons, we did six turns of the Britons attempting to withdraw, inflicting casualties, doing their hit and run. But unfortunately for them, it ended quite catastrophically with their King Trogodamus, being killed and his forces being destroyed. However, the Romans didn't get off scot-free. Vespasian himself was also picked off somewhere along the route of advance. So, whilst it was a devastating defeat for the Britons, it was equally pretty bad for the Romans in that regard. So this is our strategic positions at the end of the turn. So if you want to vote on what we're doing next, head over to the YouTube page, the homepage, and go on to posts, and that's where I will post the different options for both sides. Also, head over to the Discord channel if you want to get a little bit more involved and work together, so you can join the Britons or the Romans, and you can come up with your own plans. You can speak to me behind the scenes on setting up ambushes, even assassination attempts. That's where you'll do that, so you can get a little bit more in detail if you wish to. The links are down in the description for all of the different locations. But anyway, again, the rules that we're using for fighting the battles and the campaign are my own. It's called Shatter of Spears. It's available on my Coffee channel, so please jump on over to there to get a copy of that so you can play along as we are, and also you can understand a bit more about all the dynamics of the campaign itself. If you haven't already, do please like and subscribe so you won't miss out in the future, and go and check us out on the Facebook page so you'll also be kept updated. For this campaign, we've also got the Discord server link down below.